In the shadowed heart of Reconstruction, Alabama, where the scars of slavery bled into the soil like unspoken curses, a young man armed with nothing but numbers and naivety knocked on a door that should have stayed sealed forever. What he uncovered wasn't just a missing family, it was a divine reckoning, where the ghosts of unrepented sins refused to be counted, whispering warnings that chilled the soul. Some legacies are buried not by time, but by the hand of God Himself. The year was 1874, and the American South was a land caught in the throes of rebirth, or perhaps more accurately, a prolonged death rattle. The Civil War had scorched the earth 9 years prior, leaving behind a patchwork of ruined plantations, freed souls wandering like specters in search of promised lands, and white landowners clinging to faded glories with knuckles as pale as their cotton fields. In this fragile new era, the federal government sought to impose order through the cold precision of bureaucracy, censuses, those meticulous ledgers of life that promised to map out the nation's healing wounds. But in Wilcox County, Alabama, along the lazy bends of the Alabama River, some wounds festered in the dark, defying the light of enumeration. They whispered of sins too grave for paper, of families erased not by oversight, but by a higher judgment that deemed them unworthy of record. Enter Thomas Elias Whitley, a lanky 23-year-old fresh from the cobblestone streets of Boston, where his father, a stern mathematics professor at Harvard, had instilled in him an unshakable faith in quantification. "The world is a ledger, son," the elder Whitley would intone over flickering gas lamps, his spectacles reflecting columns of figures like Holy Scripture. "Numbers don't lie, they reveal the divine order beneath chaos." Thomas had absorbed this gospel with the fervor of a convert, seeing in every tally mark a step toward enlightenment. The war's end had ignited in him a patriotic zeal. He volunteered for the Census Bureau, envisioning his work as a bridge between North and South, a tool to rebuild a fractured union through impartial data. His assignment, the southwestern swath of Alabama, a humid labyrinth of pine forests, red clay roads, and forgotten cotton kingdoms. He arrived in Montgomery for training in early March, where grizzled bureaucrats lectured on the sanctity of complete records. "Every soul counts," they declared, pounding oak tables scarred by years of administrative battles. From the planter in his mansion to the sharecropper in his shack, name them, age them, birthplace them. Literacy? Occupation? Kin? It's the foundation of democracy. Thomas nodded solemnly, his leather briefcase stuffed with crisp forms, quill pens, indigo ink bottles, and a slim personal journal for extraneous observations, feeling like a sacred relic. The journey to Wilcox County began on a steam train chugging through landscapes that shifted from urban grit to rural desolation. As the iron wheels clattered over warped tracks, Thomas gazed out at fields dotted with skeletal remnants of battle, overgrown trenches like open graves, abandoned cannon wheels half sunk in mud. The air grew thicker, laced with the sweet rot of blooming magnolias and the acrid tang of distant bonfires. By the time he disembarked in Camden, a sleepy river town of clapboard storefronts and moss-draped oaks, the southern spring had enveloped him like a fever dream. Humidity clung to his wool coat, making his skin prickle with unfamiliar sweat. The sun hung low, casting long shadows that danced like restless spirits across the dirt streets. He boarded at Mrs. Eleanor Crawford's modest establishment, a 2-story Victorian with sagging porches and lace curtains yellowed by time. Mrs. Crawford, a widow in her 50s with steel-gray hair pinned in a severe bun and eyes that held the weary wisdom of wartime survival, greeted him with a pot of chicory coffee and cornbread still steaming from the oven. "Yankee boy, are ya?" she asked, her drawl thick as molasses, appraising his neat northern attire. "Mind the mud, it'll swallow your boots whole." Thomas smiled politely, unpacking his forms in a room that smelled of lavender sachets and faint mildew. That first night, as crickets serenaded the darkness and fireflies pulsed like errant souls, he reviewed his itinerary, 17 properties to canvass, starting with the smaller farms radiating out from Camden. The work commenced at dawn, under skies streaked with pink and gold. Thomas traversed the county on foot or by borrowed mule, his briefcase swinging rhythmically. Each visit followed a ritual, a firm knock on weathered doors, presentation of his federal badge, a brass emblem gleaming like a talisman, and the litany of questions. Full name? Age? Birthplace? Occupation? Can you read? Write? Responses varied. White farmers, their faces etched with defeat, mumbled through tobacco-stained teeth about diminished yields and mounting debts. Black sharecroppers, eyes guarded yet hopeful, spoke in hushed tones of families splintered by auctions long past, now pieced together in ramshackle cabins. Children peered from behind skirts, their bare feet caked in red earth, while elders recounted tales of emancipation that felt more like a cruel jest than freedom. The numbers flowed onto his pages like a river carving canyons, precise, unemotional. 17 souls here, 43 there. Patterns emerged, population swells on fertile lands, exoduses from barren ones. But amid the arithmetic, Thomas's journal filled with the unquantifiable, the metallic scent of plowed soil after rain, the mournful lowing of cattle at dusk, the way sunlight filtered through Spanish moss like veils of forgotten prayers. He noted the spiritual undercurrents too, roadside crosses marking unmarked graves, hymns drifting from distant churches, a pervasive sense that the land itself bore grudges, as if the blood of slaves had seeped into the roots, cursing the harvest with divine discontent. By the evening of March 18, ensconced in his lamplit room at Mrs. Crawford's, Thomas pored over his accumulating forms. The oil lamp cast flickering shadows on the walls, mimicking the dance of ghosts. Sipping tepid tea, he cross-referenced his data with pre-war archives borrowed from the county courthouse, a dusty tome of 1860 plantation censuses, yellowed pages brittle as autumn leaves. Discrepancies leaped out like accusations. Green Plantation, 38 slaves in 1860, now 41 sharecroppers, a modest growth, explicable by births and loyalties forged in chains. Dobson, 52 to 27, a hemorrhage, families fleeing north for factory wages or urban anonymity. Then, Hawthorne Plantation. The name stared back from the 1860 ledger, 63 slaves under Jonathan Hawthorne, a cotton baron whose yields rivaled the Nile's fertility. Tax rolls confirmed ongoing operations, bales shipped to Mobile, corn bartered locally. Yet, in Thomas's rounds, silence shrouded it. Neighbors omitted it from casual tallies, their eyes averting like sinners dodging a preacher's gaze. When pressed, a green farmer paused mid-sentence, his pipe smoke curling like incense at a forbidden altar. Hawthorne? Ain't much truck with them, he'd muttered, voice dropping to a whisper as if the name invoked spirits. Deeper digs in the archives yielded voids, no post-war inventories, no emancipation filings, no labor contracts. It was as if the plantation had slipped through time's cracks, existing in a limbo where human ledgers failed. That night, as thunder grumbled like God's distant rebuke, Thomas confided in Mrs. Crawford over breakfast the next morn. The kitchen hummed with the sizzle of eggs in cast iron, the aroma of bacon fat mingling with wood smoke. Hawthorne Plantation, do folks still reside there? He inquired, fork poised. She stirred vigorously, spatula scraping like nails on a coffin. Reckon so. 15 miles west. Huggin' the river. Her movements were deliberate, avoiding his eyes. Private lot, them Hawthorns. Always were. Pressed on the owner, she slammed the plate down, eggs jiggling like unsettled spirits. They tend their own. We tend ours. Her tone carried the weight of unspoken taboos, a biblical caution against meddling in affairs veiled by providence. Undeterred, Thomas resolved to visit. The spiritual itch gnawed at him. Was this mere administrative oversight, or a sign of deeper malaise? In his journal, he scribbled, "Numbers are the language of truth, but what if some truths are sins too heavy for ink? Like Cain's mark, invisible yet indelible." Renting a horse and buggy from old Silas at the livery, a man with hands twisted like ancient roots, Thomas mentioned his destination. Silas fidgeted, cinching straps with feigned focus. Hawthorne? Roads re a mire, son. Rains turned em to quicksand. Best wait. Thomas insisted, federal duty his shield. Silas's eyes, watery with age, met his. Some places welcome the light, others devour it. Hawthorns? They ain't keen on counters. The trek west unfolded like a descent into parable. The road devolved from packed earth to rutted trails, mud sucking at wheels like greedy hands from below. Abandoned fields flanked the path, wild cotton blooming in spectral white tufts, swaying in breezes that carried chills despite the sun. 3 lesser farms passed, chimneys puffing smoke, laundry flapping like surrender flags, yet no soul stirred. It was as if the land held its breath, awaiting judgment. Hours later, pines thickened into a cathedral of shadows, branches interlacing overhead, dappled light piercing like accusatory rays from heaven. The air cooled unnaturally, Thomas's breath visible in wisps, a harbinger of the uncanny. Then, the forest parted, revealing Hawthorne Plantation, a vision both majestic and profane. The manor loomed at the avenue's end, flanked by oaks whose limbs twisted in eternal supplication. 2 stories of antebellum grandeur, pristine white columns gleaming under fresh paint, windows shuttered like closed eyes, verandas immaculate as if scrubbed by invisible hands. In a South ravaged by war and neglect, this perfection screamed anomaly, no rot, no scars, as if time itself had been bribed or bewitched. Beyond, the quarters squatted in neat rows, 20 cabins of weathered wood, thatched roofs intact, chimneys exhaling thin smoke that dissolved into ether. Fields lay furrowed, ready for seed, barns sturdy, a smokehouse exhaling savory hints of curing meat. Yet, emptiness reigned, no laborers tilling, no children laughing, no dogs snarling. Only winds sighing through leaves, a mournful dirge. Thomas urged the horse forward, hooves echoing like judgments on Judgment Day. The avenue's oaks seemed to lean in, branches brushing the buggy like spectral fingers probing for secrets. He halted before the house, boots thudding on porch steps that creaked under invisible weight. The door, solid oak, brass lion knocker roaring silently. 3 knocks reverberated, swallowed by silence. Footsteps approached, measured, deliberate. The door creaked open, revealing Edmund Hawthorne, mid-50s, gray hair slicked with pomade, mustache trimmed to precision, clad in a tailored suit of midnight wool. His eyes, pale as faded tombstones, appraised Thomas with a gaze that pierced to the soul, weighing sins unspoken. "May I assist?" Edmund's voice, courteous, yet laced with frost, like a pastor delivering a eulogy. Thomas Whitley, Federal Census Enumerator. Credentials flashed. "Here to record residents and workers." Edmund eyed the badge without touch. "Edmund Hawthorne. This is my domain. Son of Jonathan." Thomas noted the lineage, quill hovering. Per 1860 records, 63 souls labored here. Now, as free folk? Silence stretched, thick as fog. "We're secluded, Mr. Whitley. Officials seldom venture. The census is law. Mandatory." A smile flickered, cold as winter dawn. "Duty admired. But dusk approaches. Return at morn, daylight aids accuracy. Sun still hung, 2 hours grace." Thomas pressed, but Edmund's tone hardened, polite steel. "Insist on safety. The road devours the unwary at night. Dawn, then. I'll anticipate." The door shut with finality, echo lingering like a curse. Retreat to Camden unfolded under a sky ablaze in crimson, as if heaven wept blood for hidden transgressions. Thomas's mind churned, the immaculate facade, absent life, Edmund's veiled warning. Spiritual unease bloomed. What if this was no mere anomaly, but retribution? Biblical echoes haunted him, families like Lot's, spared or damned by divine whim, or Achan's kin, buried under stones for concealed sins. At supper, Mrs. Crawford's table hosted Porter, a rotund salesman with ruddy cheeks, and Larson, a gaunt lawyer with hawkish eyes. Stew steamed, bread crusty. Hawthorne visited, she probed. Met Edmund. Return tomorrow. Porter paused, spoon midair. Edmund? Thought Jonathan reigned eternal. Son's claim. Porter chewed reflectively. 15 years peddling wares here. Jonathan bought a plenty pre-war. Post? Nada. Self-sufficient, they say, impossible. Tools where seeds fail. Larson leaned in. Handled county cases, inheritances, disputes. Hawthorne? Blank slate. No deeds, wills. Odd for such acreage. Mrs. Crawford cleared plates hastily. Private folk. Avoid entanglements. Thomas interjected, Hawthorne's since 30s. Wife? Children? She faltered. Saw the missus once, ghostly quiet. Kids? Kept hidden, like forbidden fruit. 1860 lists wife, 3 offspring. Edmund 1, siblings? No reply, dishes clattered in retreat. Larson eyed Thomas. Post-1860 void? Absolute. Property thrives, yet uncounted. By man, Porter murmured, or God? The question hung, heavy as original sin, seeding dread that would blossom into nightmare. For in the South's shadowed groves, some families weren't omitted by error but erased by a justice that tallied souls in eternal ledgers, where repentance was the only currency, and Hawthorne's debt loomed unpaid. The veil between the seen and the unseen had always been thin in the post-war South, where the land itself seemed to groan under the weight of collective transgressions, slavery's iron yoke not fully shattered, but bent into new forms of bondage. In Wilcox County, Alabama, 1874, the air hung heavy with the residue of rebellion and Reconstruction, a spiritual miasma that clung to every cotton boll and cypress knee. Churches dotted the landscape like sentinels, their steeples piercing skies that wept frequent rains, as if heaven mourned the unrepented atrocities below. Preachers thundered from pulpits about divine retribution, quoting Revelation scrolls where names were blotted out for iniquity, warning that no ledger of man could hide from the Almighty's audit. It was in this charged atmosphere that Thomas Whitley, the young census taker from Boston, found himself ensnared in a mystery that transcended mere paperwork, delving into the realm of moral reckoning and supernatural unease. The evening prior, at Mrs. Crawford's boarding house in Camden, the dinner conversation had unraveled like a frayed rope, pulling Thomas deeper into the enigma of Hawthorne Plantation. The parlor, lit by a single kerosene lamp whose flame danced erratically, casting elongated shadows on wallpaper faded to the hue of aged parchment, felt like a confessional booth. Porter, the salesman with his belly straining against vest buttons, and Larson, the lawyer whose fingers tapped rhythms of legal intrigue on the oak table, had probed the void in the records. Counted by whom? Porter had echoed, his voice thick with the remnants of stew and suspicion. Thomas, his fork paused midair, replied with a gravity that surprised even him, by anyone, not the county clerks with their dusty ledgers, not the state officials tallying taxes like Pharisees counting tithes, not even the federal government, with its grand illusions of unity through enumeration. It's as if 63 souls, bound in chains, before the war, vanished from every scroll, every archive, as though a divine hand had erased them in judgment. The words hung in the air, heavy as incense in a cathedral, invoking biblical parallels that made the room feel smaller, more oppressive. Mrs. Crawford re-emerged from the kitchen, her apron dusted with flour like ashes from a penitential rite, her face etched with lines that spoke of witnessed horrors. "Gentlemen," she interjected, her tone firm yet trembling at the edges, like a bell tolling for the damned, "the hour grows late. Dawn comes early for us all." It was a clear eviction from the topic, but Thomas, driven by a compulsion he couldn't name, perhaps the Holy Spirit's nudge or his father's mathematical dogma, pressed on. "Mrs. Crawford, one final inquiry. When did you last lay eyes on any from Hawthorne? Not rumors whispered like forbidden psalms, but seen with your own gaze?" She froze in the doorway, her back to them, shoulders hunched as if bearing an invisible cross. The silence stretched, broken only by the tick of a grandfather clock in the hall, each second a hammer strike on an anvil of conscience. "I'm uncertain," she murmured, voice barely above the creak of floorboards. "A year? 5? Nay, over a decade, perhaps more. None venture to town, none kneel in our pews on Sabbath, none barter at market. As you surmised, Mr. Whitley, they're uncounted." Turning then, her eyes gleamed with a mix of fear and knowing, like Eve after the bite, but some omissions are mercy's veil. Not all should be tallied, lest we unearth what God buried for our soul's sake. With that, she retreated to her chamber, the door latching like a seal on a tomb. Thomas retired to his room, the narrow bed creaking under his weight as he tossed amid linens damp with humidity. Sleep evaded him, replaced by visions that blurred dream and prophecy, census forms unfurling like ancient scrolls, numbers morphing, 63 dissolving to 42, then 17, fading to voids where names should stand. Blank expanses stared back, accusing him of hubris, echoing the psalmist's cry, "Let them be blotted out of the book of the living." He awoke before cockcrow, the pre-dawn chill seeping through cracks in the walls, dressing in haste, starched shirt, wool vest, boots polished to defy the mud. Slipping out without rousing Mrs. Crawford, he avoided further words that might erode his resolve, like doubts assailing a pilgrim's faith. At the livery, the same gnarled Silas harnessed the horse, his breath fogging the air like spectral warnings. The road west unfolded in a shroud of morning mist, the buggy's wheels carving furrows in dew-slick earth. The horse's hooves thudded rhythmically, a somber march, its exhalations forming clouds that dissipated like fleeting prayers. Passing the forsaken farms again, Thomas noted anomalies overlooked in yesterday's haste, fresh wheel ruts scarring the path, as if a convoy of wagons had traversed recently, ghostly processions perhaps, direction indiscernible, evoking biblical exiles wandering without destination. The pines loomed taller in the fog, their needles whispering secrets, the air crisp with pine sap and river dampness, a sensory veil that heightened his spiritual vigilance. Arriving at Hawthorne's Oakline Avenue by 7:15, the rising sun pierced the haze in golden shafts, illuminating the manor like a reluctant revelation. The house appeared transformed in morn's light, less a fortress of shadows, more a relic of antebellum pride, its white columns glowing ethereally, chimney smoke curling upward like incense to an indifferent deity. Thomas clutched his briefcase, the leather cool against his palms, forms within crisp as unsoiled consciences. Ascending the porch, boots echoing on wood that seemed to sigh underfoot, he raised a hand to knock, but the door swung inward, Edmund Hawthorne materializing as if summoned by occult means, his gray eyes piercing the mist. "Mr. Whitley, timely as Providence," Edmund intoned, voice smooth yet edged with steel, gesturing inward. The foyer enveloped Thomas in opulence preserved against time's ravages, floors of heart pine gleaming under fresh wax, a chandelier of crystal prisms refracting light into rainbows that danced like elusive grace. Walls bore portraits, stern patriarchs with mustaches like judgment's blades, matrons in lace collars evoking Puritan restraint, children frozen in poses of unnatural rigidity, their eyes following like watchful angels or demons. Edmund ushered him to a paneled study, the air thick with scents of aged leather and pipe tobacco, a massive desk strewn with ledgers arranged with Masonic precision. Seating himself opposite, Thomas felt dwarfed, as if entering a confessional where sins were tallied not forgiven. "Proceed with your inquisition," Edmund said, fingers steepled like a bishop's. Thomas unfurled his notebook, quill scratching parchment. "Full name? Edmund Jonathan Hawthorne. Age? 52 revolutions around the sun. Birthplace? This very abode, under these rafters." Marital status elicited a pause, Edmund's gaze drifting to a window where light filtered through lace curtains like veiled truths. "Widowed," he uttered, a shadow crossing his features, evoking jobs losses. "Offspring? None to claim. Occupation? Steward of soil and souls, landowner, cultivator." Literacy affirmed, Thomas pressed onward, Edmund's responses clipped, precise, a fortress of facts without fissures. But querying other denizens cracked the facade. "Additional residents?" Edmund echoed, "Other residents," as if the notion were heresy. "The 1860 enumeration lists Jonathan, Sarah, and 3 progeny, you and siblings presumably." "A beat, then, father perished in 62, amid war's fury. Mother in 65, claimed by fever's wrath. Brothers departed this domain. Whither? Correspondence ceased, paths diverged like Cain from Abel. No kin beyond? The manor stands solitary. Now, the crux, laborers. 63 bondsmen in 1860, how many endured post-emancipation?" Edmund stilled, fingers drumming a solitary tattoo on oak, a morse of unease. "None." Thomas's quill halted. "None. Yet quarters smoke, fields furrowed, labor manifests. You queried remainders from emancipation. Truthfully, all fled in 65. Then current tillers? New hires, transient as seasons. Quantify." Edmund rose, approaching the window, back turned, hands clasped as in prayer. The view, fields stretching like promised lands unclaimed. His voice, modulated, "Confession time, Mr. Whitley. Records lapse, workers ebb and flow, seasonal specters preferring shadows to scrutiny." Thomas's ire stirred, a righteous indignation akin to prophets decrying idolatry. Size demands order, payrolls, rosters. Unusual laxity. Privacy's sacrament here, informal pacts suit all. This census mandates totality. Refusal invites federal scrutiny, like Pharaoh facing plagues. Edmund pivoted, expression a glacial calculus, not rage, but predatorial weighing. "So be it. To the quarters, then. Count flesh yourself. But heed, they're humble folk, wary of badges. Speak sans my mediation, and fear seals lips." Odd edict, yet Thomas acquiesced, trailing Edmund into the warming morn. The path snaked past a overgrown garden, wild roses thorning like crowns of suffering, petals blood-red in dawn's glow. Quarters loomed, 20 huts in martial rows, plank walls mud-daubed, roofs shingled against tempests, windows like watchful eyes. Smoke ascended from 8, coiling heavenward like souls in ascension or perdition. 8 occupied? Thomas queried. Presently, flux eternal. At the first, Edmund rapped, 3, pause, 2, a cipher, Masonic or sinister. Door creaked, revealing a middle-aged black man, visage hardening to impassivity upon sighting Thomas, a mask forged in oppression's fires. Mr. Whitley, enumerator, Edmund announced. Silence. Name? Thomas coaxed, voice soft as a shepherd's. Glance to Edmund, nod imperceptible. Robert. Surname? Just Robert. Age approximate, birth Georgia vague. Field hand, solitary, illiterate. Answer skeletal, soul stripped bare. Next, Hannah, 30-ish, monotone litany, recent arrival, kinless, history avoid. Third, Marcus and James, brethren in 20s, echoes of prior phantoms. Pattern crystallized by fourth, all black, post-war migrants, familial vacuums, narratives barren as salted earth. No external ties, like hermits in desert exile. And a pervasive weariness, not labor's toll, but soul-deep fatigue, shoulders sagging as under invisible yokes, eyes dulled like lamps extinguished by divine decree. Fifth, Samuel's kin wife, Jacob, 8, mercy, 6. Children hid behind skirts, gazes vacant as idols. Schooling? Thomas ventured, smile tentative. Edmund interceded, remote, they aid lightly. Disturbance, children's affectless stares, devoid of youthful spark, curiosity quenched, like innocence sacrificed on altars of secrecy. Remaining trios, more isolates, more voids. Tally, 8 adults, 2 young, 10 stewards for vast acres. Sufficient? Thomas challenged, amid cabins rows. Varies, swells with sewing. Vacant dozen, last tenants? Memory fades. Dissonance nod, no overt chains, yet aura of captivity, spiritual shackles. Free to depart? Edmund's smile, arctic, emancipation decrees liberty. Choice binds them, shelter, sustenance versus world's wilderness. Logic impeccable, yet resonant with falsehood, like serpent's guile in Eden. Edmund pivoted toward manor, but Thomas halted. Outbuildings next, barns, sheds, for comprehensive chronicle. Population census demands structures? The question lingered, a gauntlet thrown, as morning sun climbed, casting shadows that hinted at deeper darknesses yet unveiled. In this plantation's heart, where sin's legacy festered like unhealed wounds, Thomas sensed a biblical drama unfolding, redemption elusive, justice inexorable, souls teetering on oblivion's brink. The sun hung high over Hawthorne Plantation like a watchful eye of providence, its rays filtering through the canopy of ancient oaks, casting dappled patterns on the red clay earth that seemed to pulse with the buried heartbeats of the oppressed. In this year of 1874, the South was a cauldron of simmering resentments, where the 13th Amendment's ink had barely dried, yet its spirit was often diluted by the sweat and blood of those still ensnared in shadows. Biblical justice loomed large in the collective psyche. Preachers in dusty chapels invoked the plagues of Egypt, reminding flocks that Pharaoh's hardened heart invited divine wrath, that no hidden iniquity escaped the Lord's ledger. It was amid this spiritual turbulence that Thomas Whitley, his soul increasingly burdened by the weight of unseen sins, pressed Edmund Hawthorne for a fuller revelation of the property's secrets. The air between them crackled with unspoken accusations, the kind that echoed the confrontations of prophets before kings, where truth demanded exposure at peril of the soul. Edmund's hesitation was palpable, a flicker in his pale eyes like the brief shadow of a crow crossing the sun. His hands, veined and steady from years of wielding authority, clenched momentarily at his sides, betraying the inner turmoil of a man whose empire was built on foundations of sand, moral quicksand that swallowed the righteous and the damned alike. A complete chronicle of the estate? Thomas reiterated, his voice steady but laced with the fervor of one uncovering idolatry in the temple. Edmund nodded, the motion reluctant, as if conceding ground in a spiritual siege. As you insist. The barns lie yonder. They traversed the fields, boots sinking into furrows still damp from morning dew, the soil rich and loamy, exhaling the earthy scent of fertility mingled with faint decay, a reminder that life sprang from death, that crops flourished on grounds soaked in the toil of generations. The barn complex emerged like ancient monoliths, wooden behemoths weathered by storms yet standing defiant against time's erosion. The primary structure towered 3 stories, its broad doors yawning like the mouth of Jonah's whale, built to hoard bounties of cotton and tobacco that once fueled empires of exploitation. Flanking it, a squat workshop with tools glinting in half-light through cracked windows, and a smokehouse whose chimney exhaled wisps of hickory, evoking the sacrificial altars of old where offerings ascended to appease wrathful deities. Edmund unlatched the main barn's door with a key that jangled like chains in a dungeon, the hinges groaning in protest, releasing a rush of cool, musty air heavy with haze sweetness and the undertone of aged timber, like entering a forgotten crypt where history's ghosts whispered indictments. Inside, the cavernous expanse swallowed sound, sunlight slanting through wall fissures in golden shafts that danced with motes of dust, illuminating the space like divine spotlights probing for hidden transgressions. The ground level lay barren, save for scattered hay bales stacked like altars and a neat array of implements, plows, sickles, harnesses aligned against one wall with militaristic precision. Sparse holdings presently, Edmund murmured, his voice echoing off the rafters, harvest past dispatched, autumn's yield awaits. Thomas paced deliberately, notebook in hand, jotting dimensions and states, beams hewn from heart pine, floors compacted earth scarred by decades of labor. The textures assaulted his senses, the rough splinter of wood under fingertips, the faint crunch of straw underfoot, the dim glow that cast elongated shadows, mimicking the stretched forms of the weary. His gaze snagged on anomaly. The rear wall bore a line of iron hooks, forged stout for burdens, half laden with ropes coiled like serpents and harnesses dangling limp. The unoccupied ones drew scrutiny. Wood beneath indented deeply, grooves worn by prolonged weight, as if bearing crosses unseen. Below, on the dirt, dark discoloration sprawled, irregular yet deliberate, elongated ovals approximating human silhouettes, crusted and faded but indelible, like the blood of Abel crying from the ground. Thomas knelt, the earth cool and gritty against his knees, heart quickening as he traced the edges with a finger, the stain flaking slightly, carrying a metallic tang that evoked spilled life force. "Mr. Hawthorne," he queried, voice tight with dawning horror, "what burdens graced these voids?" Edmund positioned himself betwixt Thomas and egress, silhouette framed by daylight, a guardian of gates infernal. "Implements agrarian, relocated per necessity." His tone, once polished, now edged with defensiveness, like a scribe caught falsifying scrolls. "These marks bespeak antiquity, drips accumulated over epochs, not mere seasons." Thomas rose, pulse thundering like apocalyptic trumpets. "Oil's mechanical, grease's preservative. This edifice functions, Mr. Whitley, not a relic preserved." Tension coiled, Edmund's posture rigid, eyes narrowing like a judge pronouncing doom. Thomas, undeterred, pivoted, the upper level beckons. Vacant expanse. Inspection imperative. A standoff ensued, gazes locked in spiritual combat, Thomas's fueled by righteous zeal, Edmund's by guarded guile. Yielding, Edmund motioned to the ladder, rungs worn smooth by countless ascents. "Proceed." Thomas mounted, aware of Edmund's proximity below, breaths synchronized in uneasy rhythm, the wood creaking like bones under strain. Emerging onto the loft, he beheld an open void intended for fodder storage, now desolate save sparse remnants. Southern windows admitted light in hazy veils, illuminating 3 enigmas: a mount of iron fetters and manacles heaped in obscurity, rusted yet formidable, symbols of bondage unbroken, and atop a beam, a dozen leather-bound tomes, spines cracked with age, stacked with reverent care, like forbidden scriptures. Approaching the volumes, Thomas's fingers trembled, sensing profane knowledge. Permission to peruse? Antiquated ledgers, prebellum agronomics, irrelevant to enumeration. Undeterred, Thomas seized the foremost, cover supple yet brittle, inscribed, Hawthorne Plantation Ledger, 1858. Pages turned with whispers, revealing mundane tallies, seeds procured, bales vended, upkeep dispersed. Normality shattered at asset roster, breath seized as eyes scanned, 63 appellations, delineating males, females, youths, ages, physiques, valuations monetary, and curiously, numerals prefixed. 1. Samuel, virile, 28, field adept, $1,200. 2. Eliza, feminine, 24, domestic proficient, 900. 3. Thomas, juvenile male, 6, robust, 500. Continuation unfolded, but numerals transcended 63, 64, Marcus, 22. 65, Hannah, 19. 66, Jacob, 5 escalating to 84, phantoms unacknowledged. Feverishly, Thomas rifled subsequent annals, 1859 to 91, 1860 to 98, 1861 to 107, yet official 1860 census chronicled merely 63 bondsmen. Discrepancy screamed sacrilege, like discovering extra commandments etched in blood. Mr. Hawthorne, Thomas's timbre quavered, elucidate. Edmund had ascended stealthily, now adjacent, countenance inscrutable as a sphinx. Ledgers agrarian, as professed. These catalogue chattel, exceeding censal bounds by 40s manifold. Tabular lapses, replications perchance. No lapses, these meticulous chronicles of existences veiled from scrutiny. Rage surged through dread, Thomas's soul ablaze like Elijah confronting Baal's prophets. Illicit harborings, concealed from authority. Prolonged hush enveloped, Edmund's voice emerging contemplative, a confessor unburdening. Mr. Whitley, query posed, you, numeral devotee, archival acolyte, what befalls the unenumerated? Absent from ledgers, juridical voids, existential nullities, what fate? Existence persists, parchments decree not reality. Do they not? Edmund cradled a tome, thumbing absently. Hypothet, agrarian covets excess chattel beyond statutory influx. Suppliers furnish undocumented, manifestless, auctionless, transferless. Do such subsist? Chill cascaded Thomas's spine, akin to Jacob wrestling the angel. Trafficking clandestine, smuggling profane. Hypothetically, I. Postbellum, emancipation proclaimed, what of non-existence? Freed how, if bondage unrecorded? 13th Amendment universal, no exemptions. Edmund's laugh, brittle as shattered commandments. Youthful naivete, Mr. Whitley. Undocumented, kinless, traceless, vanish tracelessly. Official oblivion. Nadja roiled. Their disposition? I. Innocent. Father pragmatic. Gaze drifted windowward, surveying domain like Cain's cursed fields. Procured shadows, sequestered in auxiliary abodes beyond sightlines, shielded from thoroughfares, intruders, overseers. Post-emancipation, federal heralds tallied 63 documented, the rest? Unreportable phantoms. Humanity undeniable. Whither now? Edmund pivoted, gaze glacial as Gehenna's depths. Fugitives wartime, overseers absent. Maladies claimed, labors felled. Others, pause pregnant, relocated. Whence? Enterprises valuing anonymity. Markets perennial for unregistered toil, south, north alike, sans remuneration, sans safeguards. Sustained enslavement, abolition defied. Economic verities, fissures in archival sanctity. Enumerate specters? Gesture to tomes. 44 wraiths for forms, ledger-bound, ethereal elsewhere. Quarters denizens today? Edmund's grin, serpentine. Voluntaries, destitute, kinless. Shelter, sustenance, vocation proffered. No harm, no irons. Unregistered, unreported. Retention? Comprehension, exteriors harsher. Here, existence affirmed, albeit solitary cognizance. Thomas retreated ladderward, instincts clamoring exodus, report to bastions of justice. Edmund obstructed. Departure whither? Camden bound, disclosures to federals. Disclose what? Antiquated tomes prebellum? 10 consenting laborers? Managerial distaste? Illicit servitude. Substantiate. Advance, predatory. Summon sheriff, officers, inquisitors. Interrogations yield volition, compensation lodgings victuals, egress liberty. Refute? Silence damning. Ledgers proprietary, warrantless seizure. Inadmissible. Grin triumphant. Rule-bound, cognizant veracity. Absentees relocated, deceased, historical vapors. Pursuit futile, birthless, surnameless, documentless. Specters, Mr. Whitley. Unenumerable. Despair clutched, vice-like. Edmund's logic inexorable, antiquated infractions, victim spectral, perpetrator insulated by affluence, region recalcitrant to reform. Prioritization scant for ethereal plights. Release then. Edmund yielded passage. Liberty perennial. Conclude tally. Camden return. Report freely. Yet ponder, analogous enclaves myriad? Concealed domiciles, dual archives? Uncounted multitudes southern expanse? One expose, systemic cessation? Enumerate fallen? Thomas descended wordless, barn traversed, sunlight's embrace blinding, pace hastened to buggy. Edmund trailed leisurely, composed as a Pharisee. At conveyance, reins seized tremulously. Edmund adjacent, paternal veneer. Parting counsel, enumerative quest yielded 10. Official datum. Extraneous assertions evidence lacking. Tones elusive henceforth. Laborers affirm choice. Others? Uncounted uncountable. Buggy padded. Farewell benediction. Journey secure. Retreat to Camden dazed, mind vortex, revelations churned, actions elusive, authorities skeptical. Edmund's admonition resonated, provable paucity. Boarding house arrival, afternoon waning. Mrs. Crawford, discerning pallor, brewed potent tea, steam curling like ascending prayers. Adversity evident. Thomas collapsed tableside, weight existential. Mrs. Crawford, Hawthorne verities unvarnished. She paused, hands wringing apron like penitential cloth, eyes distant as one recalling Sodom's fall. The kitchen, warmed by stove's glow, felt confessional, wood crackling like consuming fire. Truth, lad? Whispers abound, shadows in fields, cries nocturnal, souls unquiet. Jonathan's greed biblical, trafficking beyond laws, divine and mortal. Post-war, vanishings, but proofs evaporate like manna untouched. Report? Echoes in voids. Yet pray, justice divine tarries not forever. Retribution cometh, as reapers to harvest. Thomas sipped, tea bitter as wormwood, soul stirred by prophetic weight. In Hawthorne's legacy, he glimpsed abyss, where man's ledgers failed, God's prevailed, tallying every tear, every chain, promising reckoning in flames eternal. The uncounted? Not forgotten. Their cries ascended, petitions for vengeance that heaven would answer in time. The twilight of Reconstruction cast long, accusatory shadows across the American South, a land where the chains of slavery had been legally shattered, yet their echoes reverberated in the hearts of the oppressed and the consciences of the oppressors. In Wilcox County, Alabama, 1874, the air was thick with the scent of blooming dogwoods and the undercurrent of unresolved guilt, a spiritual malaise that clung to the red earth like morning dew, reminding all who tread it that the wages of sin were death, and that no hidden transgression escaped the omniscient gaze of the Almighty. Biblical parables permeated the culture, tales of Pharaoh's drowned army, of Sodom's fiery end, of the rich man in Hades begging for a drop of water from Lazarus's finger. These stories served as warnings that divine justice, though slow, was inexorable, grinding the mills of retribution with the patience of eternity. It was in this atmosphere of moral reckoning that Thomas Whitley, his spirit battered by revelations that shook his faith in human ledgers, sought solace and truth from Mrs. Eleanor Crawford in her dimly lit kitchen, where the flickering oil lamp cast dancing shadows on walls adorned with faded cross-stitched samplers quoting Proverbs, "The wicked flee when no man pursueth, but the righteous are bold as a lion." Mrs. Crawford, her face a map of wrinkles etched by years of silent witnessing, sighed deeply, a sound like the exhale of a soul unburdening itself before the judgment seat. She lowered herself into the chair opposite Thomas, the wooden legs scraping against the plank floor with a rasp that echoed like nails on a coffin. Her hands, calloused from scrubbing away the stains of daily life, folded in her lap, fingers interlacing in a gesture of reluctant prayer. "I know what the whispers carry, Mr. Whitley," she began, her voice low and threaded with the drawl of generations rooted in this soil, "but whispers they remain, for speaking them aloud invites the devil's ear. Jonathan Hawthorne, he dealt in shadows, trafficking souls not through the sunlit auctions of legality, but in the midnight barges slipping up the Alabama River. Africans smuggled long after the trade's banishment, like forbidden fruit from a poisoned Eden, children pilfered from border states, their cries muffled under tarps, men and women abducted from humble homesteads, sold into oblivion without a scrap of paper to mark their passage. He cloistered them in hidden corners of his vast holdings, beyond the prying eyes of visitors, where the pine thickets swallowed their labors and their laments. Thomas leaned forward, the table's scarred surface cool under his forearms, the aroma of cooling cornbread mingling with the faint bitterness of chicory coffee, grounding him in the mundane amid the profane. Why the silence? To whom could one report such abominations? Her eyes, shadowed by the lamp's glow, met his with a weariness that spoke of complicity's burden. Before the war, bondage was the law's sacrament. What overseer or sheriff would challenge a man for excess chattel when the system sanctified ownership? He tithed taxes on his 63 phantoms, that sufficed for earthly ledgers. And post bellum? She shook her head, gray strands escaping her bun like unraveling threads of fate. We all bore crosses of secrecy, Mr. Whitley. Every plantation in these parts harbored deeds that would wither under heaven's light, whippings unreported, families splintered without remorse, profits reaped from bloodied backs. To accuse was to invite scrutiny upon one's own threshold, like the Pharisee casting the first stone only to find his hand stayed by his own sins. But those souls linger, Thomas pressed, his voice cracking like dry earth under drought. Edmund perpetuates the veil, harboring the unregistered, the unseen. And proof? Mrs. Crawford countered gently, her touch on his hand feather-light, warm as a benediction yet chilling in its resignation. Can you name them as individuals, trace their pilgrimages from distant shores or stolen hearths? What can cry out for their return? Mr. Whitley, your righteous fury is a flame in the wilderness admirable, yet flickering against gales of entrenched power. Hundreds of such shadows dot the south, thousands perhaps, toiling in obscurity because the mighty deem it expedient, like the Egyptians tasking Israelites with bricks sans straw. Thomas withdrew his hand, the contact breaking like a covenant shattered, his soul roiling with the indignation of a prophet denied. Then what path? Inscribe 10 names on my scroll, feign blindness to the ledger's 44 specters? 44 who may have crossed Jordan's river by now, she murmured, rising to tend the stove, the clatter of pots a mundane counterpoint to existential dread. The 10? Kin to multitudes ensnared elsewhere. If we avert our gaze from the hidden, we share the yoke of their concealers, like Cain slaying Abel, then querying, am I my brother's keeper? Then enumerate them. Thomas exclaimed, his chair scraping back with abrupt force. She turned, ladle in hand, steam rising like incense from the pot. Draft your testament, dispatch to Montgomery's scribes or Washington's thrones. Petition action, but brace for silence, Mr. Whitley. The edifice was forged with fissures deliberate, chasms where the lowly plummet, unheeded by the exalted. That eve, in his chamber's confines, Thomas hunched over the desk, quill hovering above virgin parchment under the lamp's halo, the wick sputtering like faltering faith. He composed and recomposed. Each iteration diluting like wine turned water, suspected anomalies in labor, potential infractions against emancipation's decree. Further scrutiny advised, phrases hollow as sepulchres, destined for bureaucratic tombs. At last, verity flowed. Hawthorne Plantation, Dominion of Edmund Hawthorne, harbors 10 laborers sans formal chronicle. Antiquated tomes reveal clandestine bondsmen pre- and intrabellum. Victims tally obscured. Present loci of ledgered souls, enigmatic. Edict, Federal Inquisition, seizure of archives, solitary interrogation sans proprietor's shadow. He sealed it, knowing futility's sting, yet solace in truth's utterance, like Jeremiah's scrolls, consumed yet reborn. Fortnight ensuing, Thomas traversed Wilcox's expanse, enumerating 32 domains, 612 souls, 83 parchments, meticulous toil, yet Hawthorne's spectre haunted, a thorn in flesh per Pauline epistles. Ere departing Camden for Montgomery, impulse spurred revisit unheralded. April's noon blazed, sun of fiery orb of judgment. Arrival unveiled desolation, not mere absence, but abandonment's pall, quarters chimneyless of smoke, manors shuttered like sealed tombs, knocks echoing unanswered. Circumnavigation yielded silence, winds sigh through pines a mournful elegy. Barn revisited, ladder ascended, loft barrened tomes vanished, beam dust-laden as if undisturbed since creation's dawn. Quarters portals yielded voids, furnishings absent, garments fled, hearths stood ancient as Pharaoh's pyramids. Amidst the rows, Thomas pivoted, vertigo gripping, conversations recalled, voices resonant, smoke witnessed. Delusion? Or orchestration? Edmund forewarned, preparations infernal. Interviewees, apparitions scripted? Ledgers,
forgeries arcane?
Denial surged, no, antiquity's patina, minutiae's veracity defied fabrication. Ergo, erasure, laborers relocated, proofs incinerated, estates sanitized like pilots' hands.
Camden returned, parchments finalized, Montgomery bound. Report tendered to Harrison, overseer ensconced amid stacks, gaze scarcely lifting.
Irregularities, he grunted, consigning to pile.
Statewide echoes. Resources scant.
Absent chains literal, floggings, trafficking impotence reigns.
But tomes.
Elusive artifacts, Mr. Whitley.
Harrison's eyes met, empathetic yet resigned.
Frustration comprehended.
Yet bounds confine, full probes per allegation? Alabama demands myriad agents, we muster 52. Arithmetic damns.
Calculus concurred, Edmund's prophecy fulfilled, Fishers engulfed, saviors absent. 3 annum subsequent, Thomas persisted in Bureau's ranks, surveying 6 counties, thousands enumerated, portraits statistical of rebirth.
Yet Hawthorne indelible.
1875 inquiries discreet, tax scrolls affirmed existence, levies settled ownership veiled.
Wills named Edmund, taxes trusts corporate, deeds mobile entities labyrinthine as Babel's tongues. 1876 espoused Catherine, Montgomery pedagogue, justice's kindred spirit. Honeymoon confessions unburdened Hawthorne's weight. Then confront, she decreed, bold as Esther before Ahasuerus. May 1876, Wilcox revisited. Mrs. Crawford, wizened further, cautioned, Hawthorne obsesses? Forsake, lest curse cling. Undeterred, duo advanced. Estate mirrored desolation, silent, pristine in neglect.
Thorough perusal, Catherine discerned anomaly northern fringe, forest encroaching fields.
Behold! Mounds earthen, rows regimented, graves unmarked, like potter's field for outcasts. Count ascended, 41, 42, 43, 44 echoing ledger's excess.
Thomas knelt, soil chill, arid, grass nascent, months interred. Ledgered phantoms, Catherine whispered, entombed, evidence interred.
Or ruse?
Yet arboreal etchings, cross, orb, palm illiterates icons, memorials mute, like Rachel's tomb by roadside. Vigil prolonged amidst sepulchres of unenumerated, air heavy with unavenged lament.
Action? Catherine queried. Chronicle, Thomas affirmed, notebook deployed.
Hours expended, mensurations, cartography, symbols transcribed like Nehemiah rebuilding walls, stone by stone. Retreat shadowed by prescience, corpses anonymous, demises enigmatic victims or natural passages? Impenetrable. Dispatch nonetheless, response null, as foretold. 1877, Bureau forsaken, pedagogy embraced, paternal legacy in Massachusetts College, mathematics, accounting imparted. Yet doctrine augmented, numerals tally permitted, censuses elective, inclusions, exclusions deliberate. Omitted vanish historically. Hawthorne unspoken, yet surveys pedagogy warned Fishers, querying absentees like seeking lost sheep per parabolic shepherd. Plantation tax listed till 1883, subdivided, dispersed. Manor raised 1885, quarters conflagrated, fields reconfigured, erasure total, forest reclaiming burial grounds, veiling as Eden's overgrowth postfall. 1920 census, Wilcox Sands Hawthorne trace, land rechristened, narratives overlaid, inhabitants spectral. Yet Thomas remembered, office coffers secured documents till 1932 demise, forms 10 named, Robert, Hannah, Marcus, James, Samuel's kin, cemetery schematics 44, ledger notes 107 verses 63. Daughter, estate curator, perused, comprehending fixation. Donation, National Archives, annotation, kin unchronicled in censal tomes, enumerated singly by believer in remembrance universal. Archived obscurity 4 decades, 1970s rediscovery spurred Southern censal scrutiny, discrepancies unearthed, properties anomalous, families phantom. Hundreds, thousands, existences undocumented, births unregistered, deaths unlamented, sufferings unchronicled, Fisher's casualties, Thomas's exposé prescient. Centuries hence, tally elusive, systems fractured. Intentional, vanishings facilitated. Hawthorne extinct, yet ethos endures, uncounted permissible, unrecognized viable.
In censuses, statistics, archives, crevices persist. Families spectral, souls unenumerated. Yet vigilance, attending absent numerals unveils verity concealed, redemption's dawn, where divine justice seals cracks, resurrecting forgotten in eternal light. For as scriptures affirm, not one sparrow falls unnoticed, how much more humanity's lost?